Let's get started in level 3, which is called the Circle of Life, which is where we get the name for this quest. In this level, you will learn that biomes and ecosystems are very important for the survival of organisms, and you will also learn how living and non-living things interact with each other within them, so within ecosystems and within biomes. Our key point: living things interact with their environment in order to meet their needs and survive. To do so, every organism inherits characteristics from its parents that allow it to adapt and change to meet its needs. Organisms that do not inherit useful adaptations that give them an advantage will not survive as it competes with other organisms for resources. We find organisms living together and using their adaptations and instincts in ecosystems around the world. Producers, consumers, and decomposers play an important role in creating a diverse and balanced ecosystem. Let's review our big question. What do living things need in order for them to survive? We should have several things that we already know about from the 2 levels that we've already gone through to be able to answer that question. But as we progress through this lesson, we will also learn about a couple other things that living things need in order for them to survive. Mission 1 is on ecosystems. We want to be able to explain the relationships between parts of an ecosystem. So that begs the question, what are the 2 parts of an ecosystem called? So you'll need to know what those 2 parts are called. Then there are groups that would live within an ecosystem. You'll need to tell me what those 4 groups are. And then finally, you need to be able to tell me what is a niche. Before getting started, we're going to watch a short video about 2.5 minutes long for you to get some idea of what we'll be learning about in this mission. Please give it your full attention.
When it's cold outside, dressing warmly is just common sense. If you go outside without enough clothing on, you're going to get cold. And if you stay out long enough, your body temperature will drop. What do you do in response to feeling cold? You put on another layer of clothing. You respond to your environment. Just as humans need to cope with the challenges posed by the environment, plants respond to living and non-living factors in their ecosystem. An ecosystem is formed by the interaction of a community of organisms within their physical environment. This ant is an individual. This ant colony represents a population in the rainforest. These philodendron represent another population. Together, these 2 populations are part of a community. A number of communities, combined with abiotic factors such as the amount of rainfall and available sunlight, make up an ecosystem. Many ecosystems make up a biome. A biome is a large geographical region with similar plants, animals, and climate. In this tropical rainforest biome, the ants, the philodendron, and all of the other plants and animals are adapted to deal with the abiotic factors of a rainforest. These factors include high heat, humidity, lots of rainfall, shade, and nutrient-poor soil. In each of the world's ecosystems, there are 2 things that influence the lives of the plants that live there: abiotic factors and biotic factors. The prefix "a" is Greek for without, and bios is the Greek word for life. If you put these terms together, you get abiotic, which means without life. So it makes sense that abiotic factors refer to the non-living things in a plant's physical environment. Sunlight, soil, wind, rain, and temperature are abiotic factors. And if abiotic means without life, then biotic factors are the living organisms in a plant's environment. A butterfly pollinating a flower, a monarch caterpillar munching on a leaf, and a robin's nest in a tree are biotic factors.
All right, so let's talk about ecosystems. An ecosystem is all the living and non-living things in an environment and the many ways in which they interact. There are 2 parts to an ecosystem: the living parts, which, as the video called them, are the biotic parts, because bios, remember, means living, And the non-living parts, which the video called abiotic, bios means living, a means without, so without life, non-living parts. Animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria are the living parts of an ecosystem, whereas the water, soil, air, sunlight, land, and climate make up the non-living parts of an ecosystem. The plants and animals that live in an ecosystem can only survive if their needs are met. If there's one thing that you learned throughout this entire quest, that's very important that you learn this. You've heard it over and over again. Animals, plants will not survive in their ecosystem unless their needs are met, and they have developed adaptations in order to do so. Organisms that adapt to their environment are more likely to survive than those who do not have useful adaptations. This means that plants and animals in different ecosystems often have different adaptations. If an adaptation works in one ecosystem, it will not necessarily work in a different ecosystem because of the differences between them. For example, the snowshoe hare. The snowshoe hare has adapted to live in a cold, snowy environment. If you look at that snowshoe hare, you would see it doesn't really look very much different than a regular rabbit we might see in our backyard as far as the size and general look of it. But of course, it does have some adaptations that has allowed it to survive in its environment. So if the snowshoe hare lived in a desert or in a different ecosystem, in a different environment, it would not survive because it does not have useful adaptations for that environment. Before moving on, please turn to page 231 in your science textbook and answer question 2. And then after you've done so, you are ready to move on. Let's talk about the different groups of an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be divided into smaller groups. The largest group of an ecosystem is called a community. A population is smaller than a community and an ecosystem. A habitat is smaller than a population. And a niche is the smallest part of an ecosystem. Now we're going to go talk about each of those 4 different things before we end this mission. A population. A population is all the members of one type of organism that live within an ecosystem. So for example, every single giraffe that lives in an ecosystem is an example of a population. But if we were going to do a different organism, that would be a different population. So when we talk about populations, we're talking about one specific type of plant or animal. The size of each population changes depending on the amount of resources that are available. So if there are a lot of resources available for that plant or animal, the population is going to increase. If there are less resources available for it, it's going to decrease. The second part of an ecosystem is the community. The community is the different populations that interact with each other in the same area. So those are all the different organisms in an environment that form a community. So if you look at the picture and look at the text, giraffes, lions, antelopes, alligators, all of those together, all those different populations form a community living in an ecosystem. A habitat you can think of as an organism's address. This is the area or place where an organism lives in an ecosystem. It contains all the living as well as all the non-living things that an organism needs. So there you would see a picture of a giraffe. A giraffe's habitat is where it lives. It's its address. It provides its needs, whether that be living or non-living. In every habitat, organisms also have special jobs. The special job or role that an organism has in its habitat is called its niche. A niche includes the type of food the organism eats, how it gets its food, and which other species use it as food. Adaptations over time have helped organisms figure out their niche or their job in their habitat. Each population in a habitat has a different niche. And in fact, organisms may share a habitat, but they each have different jobs to perform. If they didn't have those different jobs, they would not survive as well. Here you can see the different vocabulary words, starting from the largest all the way down to the smallest role in an ecosystem, or the smallest group of an ecosystem. So ecosystem is the large one. Then we go to a community, population, habitat, all the way down to a niche. This is the end of mission 1. If you have any questions, please let me know.